Paul, yes. I was just looking at this putative marriage. A marriage that was contracted in good faith. Oh, but in ignorance of the fact that it was actually an unlawful marriage. Oh, as an example, a divorced woman might remarry without knowing that her divorce from her previous husband was not valid. Pooch. The putative marriage. Oh. Now, I know that when you file for a dissolution of marriage and it was contracted in good faith, pooch, we were actually married in Kosovo. Our marriage certificate is from the United Nations, and we're still married. And then I find out later that my wife kidnapped my sons after 10 years of marriage. And then Clallam County thought, no, we'll just fuck over their father, and we won't give him notice, and we won't require proof of service. Finding out that it's a Class B felony, kidnapping, child abduction, and child exploitation because of the perjury of motioning a court for a default dissolution of marriage. Now, it was contracted in good faith. When you think of the marriage certificate from the United Nations, and then I'm that husband that wants to get divorced and you don't want me to have my sons, proving that Washington state law allows for the defense of one, you had to be a relative of those that you kidnapped, yes, and two, you wanted sole custody of them. If I were to look at United Nations marriage laws of finding my wife guilty of a Class B felony kidnapping, pooch, what would that do when I wanted to divorce her? Well, could you get me the laws of the United Nations? Quite often when I emailed the United Nations, I had mentioned that our marriage certificate didn't have reciprocity. Pooch. Now, it could be considered an untruth on the part of the state of Washington and the United States to knowingly allow for the dissolution of marriage because of the perjury of the motion for default. And then having judges not require proof of service prior to giving permanent custody of my sons. Now you violate the PKPA, pooch. You violated the VAWA, pooch. You violated the RCWs necessary to issue court orders, ooch. You facilitated the kidnapping of children, ouch. And now you violated United Nations laws. In the United Nations, finding out that the United States of this great nation, I'm going to sue you for the refusal to enforce this nation's laws that happens to be in violation of United Nations law. Now, this purgative marriage where I contracted it in good faith when we signed that United Nations marriage certificate, but I was ignorant of the fact that the marriage was actually unlawful because my wife had agreements before we got married. Now, let's see. Mrs. Hodges was married to Tim Hodges, and she was married to John Bosma. Yes, and Marion Waters, the former judge of Jefferson County. What happens when a judge or justice of this great nation knows that you've been harboring a fugitive that has committed the crime of Class B felony kidnapping? Now, I'm thinking that I can sue you under the United Nations conventions for every oath, badge, attorney, and mandatory reporter, all of those that have the legal obligation that they have to protect children as a condition of their employment, and for every county that said, well, I'm sorry, the crime didn't happen in our jurisdiction, I'm sorry, you have to be accountable. Now, the United Nations marriage certificate gives me the right to sue every oath, every badge and attorney in the United States, in the United Nations. Now, this is what you call an international crime. So why don't you think about this whole concept of the petitioner intentionally not giving me notice of court hearings so that she could be convicted of the Class B felony kidnapping? That would be the necessary evidence of suing you in the United Nations for